going over some stuff that I want to test. If you want to go watch the entirety of all the information for the new Path of Exile 2 patch, very simple to do. Go to YouTube, search Path of Exile 2, and this will pretty much be the first video that pops up. It is a lot about the Druid. I'm going to skip through to where I see the Wyvern, because what we're probably going to do, guys, is we are probably going to create 2 different Druids so I can test both Ascendancies, and that way I can obviously play different builds. I really want to play a Wyvern build, and I'll explain a little bit about what I'm thinking, and we'll look at the patch notes, etc. And then I also want to possibly play the Werewolf. So the Werewolf is pretty straightforward. It looks like it'll be really good with cold. But the Wyvern, my friends, this is where I want us to watch this clip, and you guys can see for yourself.
Alright, let's talk about the third form available to the Druid, and I think it's a cool one. The Wyvern. The Wyvern has a number of long-range breath abilities, but that doesn't mean you can't get into melee range when you want to. The basic attack of the Wyvern is Rend. Jump forward into combat and slash your enemies with your lethal talons. If they're close to being stunned, you can blow them off balance with a blast from your wings, causing an explosion of damage. After the battle though, it's time to feed. Devour the corpses of monsters to create power charges, and this is when the Wyvern's abilities really come online. When using Rend, you can consume a power charge to charge up your wings with lightning. Not only does this do a bunch of damage, but it allows you to turn this melee skill into a much larger AoE attack. Once your wings are charged, your Wing Blast will also do lightning explosions for even more damage.
So it
If your
primarily,
enemies are close
obviously...
to death, no need to wait for them to actually die.
Here's the thing, is it just keep watching, because there's obviously a few ways that you can play this, which I think is really, really cool. Okay, you can obviously play lightning, but at the end they go through some fire stuff, and I was reading through some of the patch notes, and the amount of buffs that they're doing to all the fire skills, flammability, etc. I think there's going to be some really good scalers in the early game, and obviously into late game. A lot of power. Just a lot of power. A lot of possibility here with fire. So, obviously, lightning will probably be more meta, I would imagine. Unless, and I didn't read through all the patch notes because it's a lot of words, but unless they absolutely gutted lightning, I feel like if you want probably I would imagine someone will create some pretty meta builds, and we'll go over those before launch. Obviously, as some of the higher end creators come out with them. I know Palsteron's online right now going through all the patch notes. I know Ziz has gone through them. Quinn will go through them. Fubgun, obviously he'll break the game. Jung, Rue, all those guys will probably figure stuff out as well. But the beauty of having a new class that no one knows how it plays is if you play that class, you're going to have the ability to kind of create your own shit. The bear, to me, I wasn't a big fan. I really liked the idea of, Zach Galifianakis Wolfpack with a bunch of cold and freeze, because cold and freeze tends to obviously have great kind of mechanics in the end game, right? Like you're a lot safer in the end game when you can freeze everything. So there's that, but the fire is what I want to focus on.
When you see this blue marker, just devour them alive. Fresh meat is much tastier after all. Alright, so those are some melee options, but how about range? Well, you wouldn't be much of a dragon if you couldn't breathe fire after all. Rolling Magma is the first of the Wyvern's breath attack. So
this looks like a projectile skill, right? First thing we see, now obviously I haven't seen like the actual skill gem, but here's what I see. Is obviously there's projectiles here. Now, depending on the damage of the projectiles, etc., 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 but early game, I would imagine, because this is a range attack, and he said it's basically one of your beginning abilities, you're going to have that, and it creates... Watch, let's just finish this.
Spit balls of fire that bounce along the ground. These balls will trigger volcanoes as well, so it's a good idea to cast one as a human right before...
So you have volcanoes, right, that you can cast beforehand, and then you're spitting fire through. Okay, so obviously, flammability, ignite, magnitude, things like that are going to help burn things down. And they address specifically that they thought it was not very good So I would imagine they're buffing this pretty decent, at least to the point where it's going to be very viable, especially early game. Now, end game, because remember, guys, here's what I always look at, right? Is I am not a blaster, and if you're like me, you're going to play the game on launch. But realistically, the way that their patches come out and the way that, like if you live in Eastern Standard Time like I do, you're not going to get a lot of playing time day one. I'm just not going to be able to play 12, 15, 18 hours straight, right? Like, I'm just not going to be able to do that. I don't have the ability. So what I'm looking for when I'm creating builds is and when I say creating builds, remember, I'm just trying to have fun. In the beginning of the game, I want it to be overpowered. I want to make the campaign easy. So I'm looking at this going, okay, there's obviously, you can add more projectiles depending on how the damage is working with this. If it's a uber damage spell, maybe not. But obviously the volcanoes is there. But remember, we also have Flame Wall, right? Which anything that passes through that is good too. So this might be one of those things where you're putting more duration on your volcano skill, more duration on your Flame Wall, and then projectiles onto your rolling magma, right? And basically you're just burning everything down, right? And now that's the theory. Obviously, then you're adding things like Herald of Fire or whatever the fire one is, right? The Fire Herald. That one seems pretty good for this build. There's also some gems that convert a portion of your fire to chaos, which then you could put Herald of Poison and you could combine those things and have like a poison burn build, which could be good. I don't know for sure. I'm just saying, out of the gate, fire looks like it's going to be pretty good early game, assuming that the numbers match up.
Before you start spitting. But that's not all you can spit. You have something a little nastier in that gullet of yours. Spitting a barrage of oil at your enemies will cover them in a viscous sludge that makes them easier to ignite.
So remember,
power charges, though, plant your wings in the ground and vomit a barrage of lightning-infused projectiles.
So this is the only thing, is with the power charges, is there a way to make power charges used on non-lightning spells? Right? Otherwise, if you have to use lightning, it may be Herald of Thunder and Herald of whatever it's called, Flames or whatever it's called, right? The Flame Herald. Let me double check in game. Hang on 1 second. What is it called? I don't think I'm using it on here. Let's go to our gems real quick. Let's just look it up just so I know what I'm talking about. Herald of Ash. Okay, so again, basically what this does is it, blows up, ignites, etc. Right? So, and I'm assuming most fire stuff is getting buffed on base. So you're going to have that plus that. And so, yeah. So, again, depending on how the power charges work, if it's strictly lightning, it may be big. If not, it may not be. But remember, it also looked like there was ways that you could consume power charges, right, to basically do more damage. And we'll keep watching.
The longer you can do this for. But make sure you keep your foes at range. You're vulnerable to melee attacks while channeling this skill. In order to help with that, let's take a quick diversion back to some of your human abilities. As a Druid of Scoth, you have the ability to harness the power of nature to create entangling vines to slow down your enemies. Another of nature's punishments is the thunderstorm.
That looks clunky.
Creating one of these will create periodic strikes of lightning from the sky, and will also make your enemies wet. Why is that useful?
Now a wet
build
would be
things that are
fun.
wet are easier to shock. Use it with lightning damage from your Wyvern form to enhance your damage. Making things wet also makes them easier to freeze, so it works nicely with your wolf form as well. And you know what else likes water? Plants. Water your plants to give them various extra abilities. Use Lightning Storm with Entangle to make them last longer, and attach more vines to each enemy, slowing them further. Summon Thrashing Vines to slam at your enemies for a time. Any that are created in water will be larger and deal more damage. Now then, with our enemies sufficiently subdued with our plants, time to really lay into them with our lightning-infused barrage.
I'm hoping that that's not the only spell.
Now,
That's what I'm hoping.
This last Wyvern ability is just ridiculous, but we felt like we had to do it.
This
Use
is the
Flame
one.
Breath to take to the skies and rain down a stream of fire on your enemies. You have wings, so we have to take full advantage of them after all. So fly around and burn in it.
So again, my thought with this is obviously this is your OP skill, right? So if it works with power charges, if it works like everything else, you have, you know, your volcanoes, you have, you know, possibly flame wall, possibly fireball, with added projectiles, right? You have that new staff that looks overpowered as shit, and then you have this. So to me, I'm sitting here going, okay, like, how do you clear and how do you burn bosses down? This seems like a very straightforward process, right? Like, I'm not smart, but to me it says, okay, as long as the damage numbers are there, you're going to have your fire spells, and then they have the totems, which you can input spells into, right? So remember, if it's a spell, so let's just pull this up real quick, right? So if it's a spell, what fire spells do we have, right? And we have Flame Wall, right? So we could throw Flame Walls out. It could have, what else? We got Fireball, right? So we could do that. We've got Living Bomb, another possibility here, right? These are all things that we'll have to test. Ember Fusillade. I'm not exactly sure how that would work. I don't think that would work well in the totem just mechanically, right? I just don't think it would. So there's those, and then obviously Incinerate down the road could be ridiculous for single target, right? If you throw your totems down and it's incinerating, and then you're in the air as a dragon incinerating, I think it could get pretty crazy, right? That's what I always look at is, do I have a good single target burst ability to just melt bosses, and is my clear good? So my initial thoughts, you have Flame Blast as well, but that's a channeled spell, so I don't know that will work. You have Firestorm, which may work, right? It may work really good for clear in the totems. So there may be a situation where you're running multiple totem setups, so you have one for clear set up with Firestorm or something similar, right? And then you have another totem spell set up that's more for single target with like Incinerate or something like that, right? That's kind of my thought process, right? Now, again, like I said, I think probably, especially at the beginning of the league, because Flame Wall is very cheap at the beginning, right? Where's the fire stuff? Okay. So you have
fire after all.
The volcano, which you're going to put down, because getting all those things, this, right? So that's the volcano. So this is what I'm thinking, right? So obviously you're plopping one of these down, and then you're hurling magma, right? And then obviously if you're plopping one of these down, and then you're plopping down a totem, well, now you're just peppering everything with fire, right? And typically in clearing, that's probably going to be the best, but that's too many spells to cast, right? When you're clearing, you probably just want to be able to cast like 2 spells max. Clearing with more than 2 spells is probably going to be annoying. So my thought process is, if the volcano thing is a spell, you could even put that in a totem, and then you're just shooting rolling magma, dropping totems, right? Dropping totems, shooting magma, or dropping volcanoes, shooting magma, right? Like there's a lot of possibility here that I think where fire, especially the way that I think it's going to scale and be really potent out of the gate. Again, we don't know how Ignite's going to be in the end game, but you're burning everything, and then you're hitting everything with powerful attacks. So things like Fireball may be good, etc. And then you're just literally trying to just burn everything into oblivion. So somewhat of a DAT build, right? But also has the ability to adapt very easy. And then obviously, you know, once you get to the end game, because I look at it this way, I'll get to the end game probably 3 to 4 days after everybody else, right? So after all the blasters are to the end game and they start to figure out what builds are OP, well, this will get you probably through the campaign and into early mapping, so that you can then make the decision, okay, do I think this is going to scale, or do I go a different direction and into what the meta is, right? And I think, to me, that's the safest play, because what you don't want to do, and I've done this with Mercenary, is I started Mercenary when it came out, and obviously there was the grenade tactic, which worked really, really well, right? And originally, with the poison and the explosive grenades, it was so OP at the beginning, and then the totems or the cannons, right? Like there was some really cool shit with the grenades and stuff like that. So I think this will at least get us into the end game and be a decent league start. And what I also think is it will be a little bit overpowered, so you'll be able to have more flexibility. And then obviously, as a league start, you want it to be able to be adaptable for you to switch builds, right? And so that's why I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, this looks pretty dope. You know, dragon burning everything down, especially with some of the new chaos stuff too. It may be something at the end game where you're burning everything into chaos damage and just melting shit that way. I don't know. I'm not that smart. But those are just some quick ideas that I had where I was like, that would be fun, right? Because again, I look at it and I say, is this going to be fun or is this going to suck? And this looks fun as shit, right? Like, I'm sitting here going through and it's like, if I have to level another witch with fucking another lich.witch, right? Like, no, I don't want to do that. I want something else that's actually good. And this reminds me very much of the Rolling Magma starter, which everybody hates, but because you have the volcano and because you have things like Flame Wall and all the burning abilities, I think this could be really, really good at the beginning of a league, especially when you can add like multiple projectiles and things like that. You know, so again, I would imagine things like attack speed would be really, really good for this. You know, obviously the amount of burn damage, the amount of fire damage you can do to spells and things like that would also be huge. So we'll see how it goes. And then that staff, obviously, if you're hitting a staff with projectiles, so you're rolling that out, well, now your whole screen's just bouncing flames everywhere, and you have the volcanoes, and then you can just incinerate and burn the world. Like, I think there's going to be some really cool meme-style clips for this style of build. So, again, super early in the patch notes. Haven't read even a quarter of them yet. But just from what I quickly read about, it looks like the buffs that they're doing for fire in general, I think this will be a real thing. I think you'll be able to create a build that's really fun in this format of fire, burn, everything. So what are you guys planning on playing? What do you see? What other skills or combos? Help me out here, right? Like, what do you think is going to be overpowered or a good combo for single target versus clear, etc.? Let me know in the comments. And I'm so excited for next Friday, man. I know that the endgame patch didn't come the way we wanted it to, but I think the new Vol Temple is going to be a system that we're all going to play and we're all going to get a lot of time out of. So I feel like, you know, once you get bored with mapping, the temple will be really fun. Obviously, the end game isn't awful, but it's not where they want it to be. It's nowhere near where they want it to be. They didn't deliver on a lot of that stuff, which is an L, but I think this class looks really awesome. I think the amount of new passives, I think with the Vol Temple creating your own dungeon, basically, I just think there's going to be enough to at least give us quite a bit of entertainment out of this season. Do I think it's going to be as long as some of the other seasons? I don't know. A lot of time investment to both create and run. Yeah, that's another good point. The temple during the campaign, will it be worth? Well, here's how I look at it, right? Is Abyss, like, by my second or third or fourth character during the Abyss launch, right? Like, I wasn't that interested in running all the Abysses, right? But for the first one, like, that was basically where I got a lot of my leveling gear, was from the Abyss. So my thought is, hopefully, if they do roughly the same thing, is it'll be a really good segue for you to, like, get some gear in the beginning. And then, obviously, there will probably be a point where... but it also sounds like, because of the amount of time it takes to get into the temple and then get more layouts, I think that if you don't do it during campaign, I think your campaign is going to be more like a setup, and then as you get into early mapping, you'll probably be close to like a finished temple, so that you can actually go try out some of the new stuff. That's kind of how I see it. Um, but yeah, that is a good point with the temple. Is again, are these things going to be worth doing in campaign? And again, if it's your first character, typically yes, right? Like even if you look at the PoE, the latest PoE 1 season, the breach didn't really matter. Like my second character, I skipped almost every breach, right? Because I had the mats and the currency to build out the build that I wanted, so I just skipped it because my goal was to get through the campaign as fast as possible. On the first character, though, I mean, how valuable was it to be able to go craft that gear with the like the graphs and then crafting gear and then unlocking those points? Like, it made the campaign like a joke, right? Like, it was very, very worth, and you got a lot of XP. So when you were watching this, so one of the things I'll bring up, let's see if I can find it, but there was some of these bonuses that you can get are XP bonuses as well, right? So I think that maybe in the early game, you might focus more on like gear and XP for how you build your temple out. And then obviously in the end game, when you're redoing it, you'll want to just juice it to the max, right? I think to me, that makes the most sense. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm actually very excited for this. When I get bored in mapping in PoE 2 now, like I'll go do some trials, right? Like I don't mind Sekimas. I don't mind the Chaos trial. Like the Chaos trial is probably my least favorite of all of them, but Sekimas, getting like the urns unlocked, getting all that stuff, and then farming it a little bit is pretty fun. It's because it's always a different game every time. I think this is going to be more similar to that. I think this has the potential to be the most fun of those three things that aren't mapping in the end game, right? I think this has the potential to be number one, but it's definitely not going to be number three, right? Like this will definitely be cooler than the Chaos Trials, where you're just killing mobs or following a pillar, etc. I think this will be much more valuable. But I think Sekimas, obviously because the ascendancy points will take priority, but once you have your ascendancy, it may be a really cool thing to use this and see what kind of really cool stuff. Obviously, the big gamble, the big jackpots are going to be double corrupting items. And so I think that'll help with economy. That'll help you get your currency to get your alts going. But like I said, I am going to create 2 druids because I do want to create a wyvern, and then I do also want to create the werewolf. And I do want to test both ascendancies, and I really don't want to have to like completely redo a character every time I want to test a new build. I'd rather just have 2 of them. So I think leveling one as wyvern and leveling another one as a werewolf will be 2 very cool, unique experiences and give me enough knowledge for the druid going into launch to where I can tell, hey, I like this class, or hey, this class is not for me, right? So when you look at the mercenary, like mercenary is one of my favorite classes. When they originally launched it, I was like, oh, I could basically be the Punisher. And that was what I wanted to play. And obviously the only thing that was good when they launched was a very small couple of things. Now it's in a much better spot. And when you play it, it's much more fun, especially since they added the mortar cannons. It's just a lot more fun of a class. So I think as long as they keep doing these types of things, it's going to get a lot better. But they've put years and years and years into the druid. Like we first saw the first footage from 2023, right? So they've been, and like they said, this is the most over prepared they've had a class for launch. I think the odds of it sucking are going to be very low. I think the odds it's overpowered to start, so more people play it. I think the 2 different ascendancies have very different styles of what could be cool, and obviously depending on what those passives are in that one that gives you an entire new passive tree, basically, I think having a class that has that ascendancy and having a class that has the other ascendancy will allow you to try a lot of things. So my plan as of right now is I'm going to do the wyvern first with the elemental style ascendancy, right? Because I feel like calling down those elemental storms with the wyvern, with all the flame shit going on, I think will just be so much fun for clear and have a lot of abilities if we're going to go fire, which basically commit to something and go as far as you can with it before you trade out. And then I think with the, with the werewolf, obviously there could be a scenario where it's either or, right? But you can always switch ascendancies later. So I am going to level both, just so I have them and I can go through the experience of the campaign as a werewolf and as a wyvern. That is my plan for the season. I'll be curious of your guys' thoughts. I have to get back to work. See you soon.